October 24th, 1982. A baby girl was born, carrying one of the most infamous names in American criminal history. Her father, Ted Bundy, serial killer, manipulator, monster. That child is now over 40 years old. She has never given an interview, never been photographed as an adult, never spoken publicly about her father. She has become a ghost living somewhere in America under a name no one knows. This is the story of Rose Bundy, the daughter of evil who vanished into thin air. What happens to the children of monsters? It's a question society rarely asks, but one that haunts the shadows of every notorious crime. Before we dive into this mystery, please subscribe and ring that notification bell. This story required months of investigation through sealed court records, prison documents, and testimonies that most people have never heard. Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 women. He was charming, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. But in 1982, while sitting on death row, he became something else entirely, a father. Rose Bundy was born into a nightmare, not of her making. Her mother, Carol Ann Boone, believed Ted was innocent and chose to bring his child into the world. But what happened to that little girl after the cameras stopped rolling? Today, we're going to piece together one of true crime's greatest mysteries. Through court documents, witness testimonies, and rare interviews, we'll track the incredible story of how the daughter of America's most notorious serial killer simply disappeared. This isn't just about Ted Bundy. This is about identity, survival, and what it takes to escape a legacy of evil. This is about a woman who has spent 4 decades running from a name that terrifies the world. Some say she changed her identity. Others believe she left the country. A few think she might not even be alive. But the truth is stranger than any of these theories. Welcome to the search for Ted Bundy's daughter. To understand Rose's story, we need to understand the monster who fathered her. Ted Bundy wasn't your typical serial killer. He was handsome, educated, politically active, the last person you'd suspect of murder. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy killed at least 30 young women across multiple states. He would approach them with a fake injury, asking for help loading something into his car. Once they were close enough, he would attack. But Bundy's greatest weapon wasn't violence, it was manipulation. He could convince anyone of anything. Judges found him likable. Reporters enjoyed interviewing him. Even some victims' families questioned his guilt. And perhaps his greatest manipulation was convincing Carol Ann Boone that he was not just innocent, but worthy of her love and her child. Carol Ann Boone was 28 when she met Ted Bundy at a government office in Washington state. She was intelligent, independent, and raising a teenage son on her own. Carol wasn't naive. She was a working professional who had survived divorce and single motherhood. But Ted Bundy was a master of psychological manipulation, and Carol became his most devoted follower. Even after Ted's arrest for multiple murders, Carol believed in his innocence. She moved from Washington to Florida to be near him during his trial. She testified on his behalf. And in 1980, she did something that shocked the nation. During Ted's trial for the Chi Omega murders, Carol took the witness stand. That's when Ted asked her to marry him right there in the courtroom. In front of dozens of witnesses under Florida law, their public declaration constituted a legal marriage. The serial killer had just gained a wife while on trial for murder. But Carol's commitment to Ted was about to go even deeper. In 1981, Carol Ann Boone announced she was pregnant with Ted Bundy's child. There was just one problem: Ted was on death row. With no conjugal visit privileges, an investigation was launched immediately. How could a death row inmate father a child under maximum security surveillance? The details that emerged revealed the lengths Carol would go to create a family with a convicted killer. Through a combination of brief physical contact during monitored visits and possibly smuggled biological material, Carol had conceived Ted's child. Prison officials were horrified. The public was outraged. Mental health experts questioned Carol's sanity. But the pregnancy continued, and on October 24, 1982, Rose Bundy was born. The birth made international headlines. Camera crews surrounded the hospital. Death threats poured in. And somewhere in the middle of this chaos was an innocent baby girl whose life had already been destroyed by forces beyond her control. 3 weeks after Rose's birth, she was brought to Florida State Prison to meet her father. It would be their first and only encounter. The visit was heavily monitored and recorded. prison psychologists analyzed every moment, looking for signs of manipulation or inappropriate behavior. I'd been working death row for 15 years. I'd seen Bundy charm lawyers, reporters, even other inmates. But when he held that baby, it was different. For just a moment, you could see something human in him. Ted appeared genuinely moved by meeting his daughter. He held her carefully, spoke to her softly, and seemed to experience authentic paternal emotion. But prison officials remained concerned about his potential psychological influence. In letters written after the visit, Ted expressed what seemed like genuine love for Rose. He wrote about wanting to be a good father, about hoping she would have opportunities he never had, but these same letters also contained subtle manipulations to use Rose's existence to gain sympathy from the media and legal system. For the first 4 years of her life, Rose lived with her mother in Florida, visiting her father occasionally at the prison. But as she grew older, the reality of her situation became impossible to ignore. Rose was growing up knowing that her father was not just absent, he was one of the most hated men in America. Every news report about Ted Bundy was, in a way, about her family. Carol tried to shield Rose from the truth, but it was impossible. Neighbors knew who they were. Reporters occasionally tracked them down. The child of Ted Bundy could never have a normal life. In 1986, when Rose was 4 years old, everything changed. Carol and Boone made a decision that would alter both their lives forever. Carol filed for divorce from Ted Bundy. After years of maintaining his innocence, something had finally broken through her delusions. Some reports suggest Ted had confessed details of his crimes to her. Others believe she simply realized the truth on her own. In 1987, when Rose was 5 years old, she and her mother vanished. They left Florida without a trace, abandoning their apartment, their belongings. And any connection to Ted Bundy, Carol had spent years planning their escape. She had saved money, researched new identities, and prepared to disappear completely from public view. The last confirmed sighting of Carol and Rose was at a bus station in Gainesville, Florida. After that, they became ghosts of people who had simply ceased to exist in any official capacity. Ted Bundy would never see his daughter again. He was executed in 1989, taking any knowledge of their whereabouts to his grave. But their disappearance was just the beginning of the mystery. Where did they go? How did they survive? And what happened to Rose as she grew up carrying the most notorious name in criminal history? One of the most persistent theories about Rose's disappearance is that she and her mother entered an unofficial witness protection program. While there's no evidence of formal government involvement, some believe that sympathetic officials helped them disappear. The reasoning was, simple Rose was an innocent child who deserved a chance at a normal life. It wouldn't be unprecedented. We've helped family members of notorious criminals start over before. The child of someone like Ted Bundy would face a lifetime of harassment, threats, and psychological trauma without intervention. This theory suggests that Rose and Carol were given new identities, social security numbers, and backgrounds. They would have been relocated far from Florida, possibly to a small town where no one would recognize them if true. This would explain how they disappeared so completely. Government resources would have made it nearly impossible to trace them through normal investigative means. Another theory involves an underground network of people who help victims of violent crimes disappear. These informal networks exist to protect people who can't get official help. Carol would have been seen as a victim, a woman who had been psychologically manipulated by a master predator. Rose would have been viewed as an innocent child in desperate need of protection. There are networks of people who understand that sometimes the legal system can't protect everyone who needs protection. A child with Ted Bundy's DNA would face threats for the rest of her life without help. These networks operate through religious organizations, victim advocacy groups, and sympathetic individuals with resources. They provide new identities, safe houses, and ongoing support. If Rose and Carol connected with such a network, it would explain their complete disappearance and their ability to stay hidden for decades. The most dramatic theory is that Rose and her mother fled the United States entirely, starting new lives in another country. In the 1980s, border security was less sophisticated than today. With proper planning and resources, it would have been possible for Carol to get herself and Rose out of the country undetected. Canada would have been the obvious choice, easy to reach, and with enough population diversity that two Americans wouldn't stand out. But Australia, New Zealand, or even European countries were possibilities. This theory is supported by the complete lack of any trace of them in American records after 1987. No employment records, no medical records, no legal documents, nothing. However, international escape would have required significant resources and planning. Carol would have needed help from people with expertise in document forgery and international travel. Some investigators believe Carol may have received financial assistance from sympathetic individuals who wanted to help Rose escape her father's legacy. Whatever method they used, Rose and Carol's disappearance was so complete that even private investigators hired by media organizations have found no credible leads. Over the decades, numerous journalists, documentary filmmakers, and true crime enthusiasts have tried to locate Rose Bundy. All have failed. In 2019, a team of investigative journalists spent 2 years following every possible lead. They checked employment records, school enrollment databases, property records, and even social media profiles. We found dozens of women who could potentially be Rose Bundy based on age and location. But when we investigated further, all of them had verifiable backgrounds that predated 1987. The search revealed just how thoroughly Rose and her mother had disappeared. There were no digital fingerprints, no paper trails, no mistakes that would reveal their new identities. Some reporters claimed to have found Rose, but their stories never held up to scrutiny. The women they identified either had different ages or were simply cases of mistaken identity. Investigators hired by media, outlets, and curious individuals have had no more success than journalists. These professionals have access to databases and resources unavailable to the general public. They've checked federal records, state databases, and even international connection systems. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've found people who didn't want to be found, who had government help disappearing, who had unlimited resources. But Rose Bundy, she's a ghost. Whoever helped her disappear was better at it than most government programs. The consistent failure of professional investigators has led some to conclude that Rose may not be alive. But there's no evidence supporting this theory, no death certificate, no accident reports, no credible information suggesting harm. The internet age has brought new armies of amateur investigators trying to solve the Rose Bundy mystery. Online communities dedicated to true crime have spent countless hours analyzing every available clue. These digital detectives have enhanced old photographs, analyzed handwriting samples, and cross-referenced public records from dozens of states. They've created complex theories involving everything from witness protection to international conspiracies. We've probably spent more collective hours searching for Rose Bundy than any missing person in history. The fact that we've found absolutely nothing is actually evidence of how well she's hidden. Some online communities claim to have identified Rose through social media analysis or facial recognition technology, but these claims have consistently proven false when investigated. The failure of internet sleuths, people who have successfully solved cold cases and found missing persons only, reinforces how completely Rose has disappeared. From public view, the most hopeful theory is that Rose is living a completely normal life somewhere in America or abroad, unrecognized and unburdened by her father's legacy. Under this scenario, Rose received a new identity as a child and grew up without anyone knowing her true parentage. She might be married, have children of her own, and work in a profession completely unrelated to her father's crimes. This would be the best possible outcome. Rose would have had the chance to develop her own identity, free from the psychological burden of being Ted Bundy's daughter. A darker theory suggests that Rose lives in complete isolation, too traumatized by her heritage to engage with normal society. Some believe that Rose might have learned her father's identity. As she grew older and chosen complete withdrawal from society, she might live alone, avoiding relationships and connections that could expose her secret. The psychological burden of being a serial killer's child could be overwhelming. Complete social isolation might seem like the only way to protect both herself and others from that knowledge. The most intriguing theory is that Rose is actively working to maintain her anonymity. Possibly with ongoing help from others, this would mean she's not just hidden, she's actively hiding, constantly vigilant about protecting her identity and location. If someone wanted to stay completely hidden in today's digital age, It would require constant effort and probably professional help. But it's not impossible, especially if you started young and had resources. Rose Bundy is now over 40 years old. She has successfully remained hidden for more than 3 decades, whether through government assistance, private help, or her own determination. She has achieved something remarkable: complete escape from one of the most notorious names in criminal history. Her story raises profound questions about identity, justice, and the sins of the fathers. Should the children of monsters be allowed to disappear? Do they deserve the chance at normal lives that their fathers deny to others? Perhaps Rose's greatest achievement is not just staying hidden, but staying human. Somewhere out there, the daughter of Ted Bundy may be living proof that evil is not inherited, that we are not condemned by our parents' actions. That search for Rose Bundy continues. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the real story is that she succeeded in becoming someone other than Ted Bundy's daughter. Maybe her invisibility is her victory. What do you think happened to Rose Bundy? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story fascinated you, subscribe for more mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about crime, family, and identity.